think now let's start off with the presentation. I think Prashant is sharing the screen with all of you on my behalf, and we can start, right, Prashant?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay. So, before we get on to the main topic for today, I thought, to discuss a little bit about the overall current situation. How do organizations are finding new ways of working in order to keep their spirits high in today's scenario? So that's why I thought probably, I would wanted to kind of, put some slides telling the current situation across the sectors. So these are certainly unprecedented times, and we all have to think, differently in order to survive this phase. Perhaps what do you call it's probably the mother of all black swan events in the recent times, and we still do not know the full impact of this pandemic as of today. Mostly the organizations, they are facing various challenges with respect to their sales, their profits, growth, demand, supply chain disruptions, etc., cash flow issues, so on and so forth. And they're still assessing, still assessing the ways as to how to deal with these challenges, because it's new for everyone. It's not like a normal recession that we've seen in the past, like in 2008 or probably 90s. So this is a little different from the normal financial recession that we generally see. We have seen, as per the new, all the economists and institutions, GDP growth rate predicted for the country in coming years is probably all-time low, and we have seen how various sectors, all these sectors are struggling to cope up with the given situation. We have seen the price rise increase, in the essential products during the initial time of the lockdown. People did a lot of panic, buying, a lot of companies doing layoffs in order to cut their costs, recurring costs. I mean, I know a lot of organizations, I have seen they've actually asked their employees to, leave, and they are finding, COVID-19 as one of the reasons to cut their, permanent cost. So there are issues like that. There has been shortage of labor now. If I speak to a lot of, manufacturing entities in Delhi, and in fact, if I speak to a lot of people who are into manufacturing, they're saying they're struggling with the labor due to the movement of migrant workers. Now there has been a shortage of labor across industry. And lastly, with all these new norms for COVID-19, such as, maintaining social distancing measures, probably sanitization of workplace, providing safety gears to workers while they are working in factories. So all these factors will only increase the cost for the business in the recent times now. And with shrinking of revenues, there is no demand for the products and other such factors. This will only cause pain for organizations. And as I said, I mean, we are not in a position to predict the impact till the time the vaccine for the virus comes out, maybe. So I think perhaps companies and people, will have to consider it as a new normal, as part of their lives, and will probably have to live with it while taking extra precautions, such as maintaining social distances, wearing masks. I think wearing masks will be a new fashion now. Probably, I mean, I will not be surprised looking at people, matching their masks with the dress that they wear. So these are the new things. Probably we'll all have to kind of, live with it now. So at this time, how do organizations work during these times? So if you look at the slide that I've shown, I've actually tried to make it in a way that how the organizations will have to work in the current scenario. Organizations will first have to accept the situation, the considering this whole pandemic as a new normal for us. Probably the coronavirus will become one more virus, like any other flu, viral or maybe swine flu, etc. Of course, their organizations and health organizations are working to get the vaccine for it. But again, as I said, it's important to consider it as a new normal, because if we don't consider it new normal, probably everything will be standstill and economy will go down, and people will not be able to live life properly. They'll have to accept and try to find out ways of working while living with it. They'll probably have to respond to the situation by taking appropriate measures to protect their workforce, mitigating the risk of the virus spread. Organizations will certainly have to modify their objectives and missions, which probably they would have laid down before. Because of the virus, they'll probably have to redefine their objectives as per new normal, keeping in mind, of course, they'll have to keep their vision intact, but their mission and objectives and ways of working will have to be changed. and this is how they'll probably recover and thrive to meet the revised objectives in order to create the ultimate goal of any organization, which is creating shareholders value. So I think it goes without saying that 2020 plans will probably have to be reset for all the companies. Companies probably will have to consider some of the factors which are very relevant in order to keep the momentum going. So if you look at the slide, I have actually kept written some factors on the right side of the slide. So factors such as reviewing customer and market data, probably to highlight areas which share where market share has been gained or lost during the crisis, the areas where the companies will need to protect probably in order to win back their territory during the recovery. Companies will have to look at revitalization plans to reactivate the demand, and they'll probably have to foresee the investment plans in order to increase the demand and retain their customers. They'll have to make network deployment plans in a way that probably they may have to close some affected and least productive stores. They may have to look for opening new stores or distribution centers to to fill the gap in between. Companies may have to review the supply chain. Okay, so companies will certainly have to review supply chain factors, and they'll probably have to look at their logistical setups in order to increase the flexibility, resilience, capabilities in the long run. And they'll certainly have to work especially the supply chain disruptions that have come in due to this COVID-19. They'll have to make sure that their product reaches to customers on time. They'll probably have to devise a new procurement strategy and to relocate supply and production as needed. They may have to consider technological advancements. I think this is the most important thing, where organizations are going to invest in technology. Concepts such as automation, AI, blockchain, these are the new terms, and we all know that it's so important to change and embrace the change for technological advancements that are happening across the world. So especially automation in the supply chain sectors or in stores to facilitate the resilience and continuity of operations. I think it's very important. And lastly, organizations, CFOs, or probably the finance will have to ensure their balance sheet is robust enough to withstand any hostile approaches that the companies follow. Yeah, more. So just the second slide, Prashant. Yeah, sector-wise overview. Yeah, this one. If you look at this slide, I have tried to capture a very high-level sector overview of how the demand, realization, working capital requirements be going forward because of the pandemic. Well, I've taken the reference from one of the articles which was published by CRISIL, where they had assessed their sector-wise view based on their internal rating of the clients. So I've taken this slide and data from CRISIL's one of the reports. So if I talk of travel and tourism, I mean, this is factors such as social distancing measures, hygiene importance, etc., will make it very difficult for the sector to attract the same level of business demand that it used to. With revenue streams drying up, companies will take most strict measures to cover up for their losses. Probably, I mean, we are hearing that the travel and all these aviation sector, especially the flights companies, will probably have to they'll increase the fares because of the social distancing norms that they'll bring in while traveling, etc. So high room rentals for hotels. The sector actually is contributing almost 10% of the India's GDP, and if the situation prolongs, because it's one of the critical sectors, I think initially government may have to support once situation settles down, because this is one of the sectors where all the GDP growth, GDP of India is very important, considering the sector that this is. Working capital requirements will be moderate for the sector, as sector generally enjoys instant payments for the businesses. So working capital won't be an issue in this sector. Coming to fashion, I think one of the badly hit sectors across economy because of the crisis, as the sector does not enjoy the essential item tag. High inventory levels due to lockdown will probably not allow brands to further place orders for the new season, because immediately this COVID crisis came in and everything got stopped. So companies and brands they already had huge inventory, and with malls and other brand stores shutting down, I think their existing inventory is so high that they will not be able to place more orders. So it has a direct impact on the value chain. And for example, we as a company, because we are also a garment industry, will have cascading impact as well for this. Brands will have the pressure to sell the existing inventories by providing huge discounts, or probably they'll have to sell in bulk. So the demand is less for this. There's a huge amount of receivable outstanding in the company's books, which has actually caused delay in realization, and the working capital company's books, which actually delay in the working capital issue across the value chain. If I talk of consumer durable sector, I think this sector has a huge dependency on China for import of goods. So if you study the sector, almost half of the total imports of completely built units are actually from China. And looking at the early stages, companies may have stocked huge inventory, for their products. And because of the pandemic, there has been less demand for this sector, and because of the high inventory levels, so realization of course will be low, and similarly the working capital requirement. Now, if I talk of the FMCG sector, I think one of the sectors after pharma which has a hope for revival and will not be much impacted, as compared to other public sectors. We saw panic buying during lockdown, and demand has increased for a short term. Though there have been some supply chain disruptions initially because of the lockdown, and this has led to slowdown in growth of the sector, but ultimately things will recover once the your situation gets better slowly and gradually. Realizations and working capital needs will be moderate as compared to other sectors. If I talk of real estate and construction sectors, because of the temporary halt of income in the hands of individuals, people like you, me, the demand for affordable housing, etc., has actually come to an end for now. People are not looking at investing in houses and or the real estate for that matter. The sector will foresee a sluggish demand and will struggle for realization with banks, because banks would not be easily providing loans to people like us, because of course, because of the pandemic and the situation that has arisen, companies are not providing full salaries to people. So there is always, banks are also skeptical in providing loans to common people. So automatically the demand for real estate will come down. Similarly, for construction and engineering sector, the work has been put on hold for almost all the way, all sites due to this pandemic. Now with unavailability of workers, etc., all these factors, has actually stretched the working capital for the sector. Uh, if I talk of automotive sector, I think one sector which has always been in the story for government, for everyone, there has been a moderate dependency on China for auto parts and auto components. I mean, China, though, I mean, I think every sector we have dependency on China in some way or the other, but yes, automotive sector, we have a moderate dependency on China for auto components. Spare part, if I talk of, almost accounts for about 18% of the total imports, and tire imports for almost about 30%. So in fact, Wuhan, where the center of the virus, Wuhan has specifically been the auto hub and providing auto parts to India for a long time. And since January 20, when this pandemic spread its wings, I think products stopped getting imported, and there was a huge shortage of supply for these items. And with all these challenges coupled up with previous slowdown which was observed in the sector, I think it is expected to worsen the sector. However, a lot of analysts, believe that after the pandemic, the demand for the passenger vehicles will increase gradually due to the pandemic impact. Because as they say, that a lot of people will avoid using public transport and would like to have their own conveyance. But what exactly will be the impact of this sector is yet to be known. So the sector, I think, continue to bleed with respect to demand, realization, and working capital requirements for now. Last but not the least, pharma sector. I think one sector which is in the boom and continue to rise during the crisis is pharmaceutical sectors. In fact, sector saw a rise in huge, demand during lockdown, and it is covered in the essential items as well. The country, there has been no ban on export of medicines because of the oversupply conditions in our country. The example of this is export of hydroxychloroquine in US, which was required for pandemic. So this is one of the examples where the sector is in huge demand. And good is that India has an oversupply situation in the country. realizations are moderate with respect to companies to release their working capital. So this sector is actually booming. So if I give you, one of the instance, I'll tell you, I was having a meeting with, the chief manager of our bank, SBI, and because I was working for enhancement of working capital during these crises, as I told you, we are also producing PP kits for COVID-19. So we had required, we had requested for more. And you know what the manager said to me, that Vandeep, the only sector which is booming as on today is the Vandeep pharma sector, because generally, all these companies, the working capital limits were fully utilized earlier, but now since the lockdown, the company's working capital limit has not been utilized, and on top of it, these companies have become so cash rich that most of them have created FDs with banks. So this is how the sector is booming. So I think that's it from that was just an overview of the sectors I wanted to cover. Moving on, can we move on to the next slide, Prashant? Yeah, thank you. So working capital overview. So now starting with our main topic. While I mean, you all would be aware of the term working capital and its concepts, because I'm sure you must have studied in detail about this in your curriculum. But let's have a small discussion on it, for a while. Practical aspect of it when it comes to working capital, and I think it will help you understand the later part of slides in detail. And I hope this will be a refresher for all of you guys. So, what is working capital? Theoretically, it means current assets minus current liabilities, right? It denotes the amount of funds which are needed for meeting day-to-day operations of a going concern. So if I say in layman terms, what it means is, I can say it circulates business like the blood circulates in our body. It's that important for any business. Generally, working capital refers to the current assets of, for example, cash. From cash, it converts into inventory. From inventory, it converts into work in progress. From work in progress to finished goods. From finished goods to receivables, and from receivables ultimately to cash. So working capital, it enhances the liquidity, credit worthiness, and reputation of the organization throughout the time, because it helps you in meeting the daily activities for the organization. It is a measure of a short-term financial health of any organization, right? It plays a part business, as I said. Working capital is needed for efficient use of fixed assets. In order to enhance companies' goodwill, a healthy working capital is always required, because it is very necessary to build good reputation amongst all our suppliers while making payments to them on time. You're paying bank dues on time, paying EMIs on time. So if working capital is in control, you will be able to create a good reputation for any organization. I think so working capital and cash, they becomes the key element for any successful business performance at point in time. So as I said, it's the lifeblood of business, and every business needs funds in order to run its day-to-day business. So if I talk of the components of working capital, mainly as you can see on the slide, we have 4 components: the debtors, creditors, inventory, and other items, which includes day-to-day work expense, which are essential in order to run the operations. Debtors are basically your customers from whom you are supposed to receive money for the sale of product. Inventory is basically the investment in raw material stock that you've purchased from the buyers for production of the finished goods. It puts the stock lying in the factory premises in the form of working capital, work in progress, and finished goods. Then creditors are mainly your suppliers from whom you have purchased the raw material in order to produce the finished goods. Then you have other cash expenses such as salaries, conversion cost, wages, electricity payments, rent payments, your EMIs for the loan that you have taken, interest on the working capital, so on and so forth, which form part of your working capital requirements. So there are various drivers, for each component to optimize the working capital requirement of any organization. You would see all these components on the slides under each component, such as daily sales outstanding, the daily payments outstanding with respect to creditors, your inventory holding period, billing cycle time, etc., so on and so forth. Well, I won't be going into the details of the drivers for now in the interest of time, but yes, these companies need to work on improving these drivers and KPIs, in order to optimize the working capital and help in managing the overall capital for any organization. Now, talking about the cash conversion cycle, if you look at the bottom of the slide, I've just prepared, a little bit of visualization as to what exactly is cash conversion cycle. So it is one of the most important factor to be looked at, specifically during times like this when you need to manage the working capital. Cash conversion cycle is also called operating cycle for any organization. Is nothing but a metric that expresses time in days. The company takes it to convert from investments in inventories ultimately to the cash. So the form that we discussed, from finished goods, from cash to inventory, inventory to finished goods ultimately to cash. So ultimately the time in days is actually a cash conversion cycle. So I'll explain you a little bit more in detail about it. So it differs from industry to industry based on the nature of business operations that you are dealing with. It becomes very important, especially for manufacturing entities, to focus on their cash conversion cycles. Outside stakeholders like lenders, banks, they pay huge attention on cash conversion cycle of companies while disbursing working capital loans. They generally restrain from lending, to companies if the cash conversion cycle for the business is quite long. So let me give you an example for that. Say a manufacturing entity receives an order which is to be delivered on a particular date. Now, the total time taken by the entity from execution to delivery, which includes, the lead time of inventory when it reaches your factory, plus, the time, the conversion time, which is the time taken to manufacture and deliver the finished goods, then the transportation time when you dispatch your goods and it will ultimately reach to your customer, and then the number of days in which the customer will ultimately pay you the receivables. So all these, number of days since the start till the end, till the time you receive cash, is actually the cash conversion cycle. Now, in this, you ultimately have to calculate, the number of days in which you will make payment to supplier, which has to be subtracted from this total time. So when you subtract the creditors part, then you calculate the cash conversion cycle for any business. Now to calculate it at an organization level, you have to calculate at the overall inventory period, because you may have to purchase raw materials from various suppliers who have different payment terms. The average credit sales period of the organization, because your customers will have different payment terms, and then you have to subtract the average payment terms of suppliers. So this, as I said, this acts as a very important measure when it comes to optimization of working capital. Okay, moving on. Can we move on to next slide, Prashant? Yeah, thank you. Guys, at any given point in time, if you guys have any question, I suggest you can park your questions for later time when we'll have the Q&A session, and you can always ask moderators to put the question, and then I'll try to give the answers for that. Okay, so slide 5, which says building blocks for effective cash management. Now, you guys must have heard about the cliche, which is cash is king, right? It's an old cliche, but it never gets tired, I guess. Every company knows the importance of positive cash flow. I mean, having a positive cash flow in books, especially when it comes to sustainability of business and financial risk reduction, it is so important and vital. I mean, after all, meeting necessary operational and maintain, expenses and servicing debts on time is always a sign of, a healthy business, as I said. So the cash has always been the big elephant in the room, and companies just can't ignore it. And I know companies who have ignored the cash, they've gone bankrupt in time. I mean, cash is so important. The hard reality is, even if the business is profitable and running the show, companies can still go bankrupt if it fails to manage its cash flows. So in order to manage the cash and the positive cash flow, generally there are 3 fundamental building blocks which most companies follow. So as part of the leading practice across industries. So if you know, all these consulting companies like KPMG, Deloitte, Boston Consulting Group, or McKinsey for that matter, Bain and Company, etc. These companies always have a, you know, a product to sell, which is the working capital optimization and, you know, reducing their conversion cycle. So whenever, you know, you appoint these companies to work with you, they will always follow, you know, suggest these leading practices, which is you know, the fundamental building blocks which companies have to follow. One is working capital optimization, second is cash flow forecasting, and third is liquidity management. Okay, so what is working capital optimization? Uh, you know, it is very important to manage both the asset and the liability side in an integrated manner. It's important to maintain the right balance between the receivables that you have to receive from the customers and the payment that you have to make to your buyers. You know, what we have seen is many times all the small and medium enterprise companies, or in fact some bigger organizations for that matter, you know, what they do is, just in order to maintain their positive cash position in books, they keeps on delaying their payments to suppliers, you know, and ask for longer credit terms from suppliers. So this does not create an optimized situation, you know, when it comes to managing the cash flow and the cash conversion cycle for that matter. And especially in cases, you know, where the working capital funding is required, it actually reduces your drawing power. So if you guys don't know about drawing power is actually a term which is used by banks to fund your working capital. So whenever a working capital is funded to fund any organization, the drawing power is calculated, which is nothing but, you know, the debtors, the inventories. So if you get subtracted from the inventory, so to have more, you know, funding from the bank. So it is always important and vital to have a right balance of assets and liabilities on both sides. So this is what you call optimization of working capital. Cash flow forecasting. You know, many companies do not give you know, more emphasis on preparing frequent cash flow forecast. So now I'm assuming here that you all know what forecast means. So just to give you a very basic idea of it, it means predicting your inflows and outflows of cash while considering the current cash flow position. Uh, you know, if I start explaining you the planning, budgeting, and forecasting in detail, it will actually take a whole new lecture. I mean, it's a very vast topic in detail in itself, and is one of the most important process for all the organizations. Well, you know, I was also, in fact, I was this topic I was anyways planning to take up with you guys had I visited your campus, you know, but this COVID thing happened, so this could not happen. But anyways, if given a chance, we'll definitely try and cover this topic as well later on. Okay, so let's move on. So cash flows is nothing but predicting your future inflows and outflows considering the current cash flow position. No doubt, it's an activity which requires a lot of effort, you know, as a person who is preparing it actually needs to coordinate with almost all the department heads, you know, to have the most accurate information with respect to their current and future spending. And they'll have to work upon various scenarios, you know, in order to make it more robust and accurate. You know, but this is the most vital activity a treasury function can have, and, you know, helps the organization in knowing the future path. uh, Cash flow forecasting allows organizations to take appropriate measures well in advance. So in case there is a shortfall that is coming, or, you know, or they can earn indirect interest income if they have a positive situation by, you know, creating an FD in bank, other securities if they invest in, they'll probably can, you know, earn a little bit of profit for a reasonable duration. So cash flow forecasting really helps to, you know, predict whether you will have a shortfall or you will have a positive, you know, cash flow position. Most companies prepare a quarterly forecast, but I think a more frequent forecasting should give, you know, extra leverage to organizations, especially during these times, you know, and help to manage the situation. Okay, so let me give you one example of our organization. So we are a garment manufacturing entity, and garment industry cash conversion cycle is quite long, you know, as compared to other industries. And you know what happens mostly, the raw material that is purchased from the suppliers is purchased by providing letter of credits to suppliers or an advance PDC. So for people who do not know what letter of credit is, it is nothing but a small arrangement between the supplier and the bank, where bank on our behalf gives a letter of credit to the supplier that on a fixed date they will be able to encash their payment for the product or the inventories that they have supplied to us. So our liability gets fixed, and of course we give interest to bank for that. So whenever we buy raw material, we have to provide LCs to suppliers, or we issue an advance post dated check. In both the cases, our liability gets freezed. And generally the payment terms are counted from the date of invoice and not from the date of transportation. So for example, if it has a direct impact on cash conversion cycle. For example, if a supplier is actually supplying products, say, to us, or raw material to us, and the payment terms are 30 days from the date of invoice. Now what happens, the moment supplier ships the products to us, what happens, the clock starts ticking for us, and the transportation time of say 5 days or 6 days also goes in vain, because we can't start working on the inventory till the time it reaches our factory. The cash conversion cycle. Now when and it ultimately increased the cycle for us. When it comes to debtors realization, when we actually sell our products to our customers, the buyers, they have cycle, and still there is no security for the goods dispatched, like we give security to the suppliers when we purchase raw material. In this case, we do not have any LCs or PDCs from the buyers mostly, and it works like that. And generally the payments that come in from the buyers, they have a fixed payment term of say 70 days from the date of grn is the day the date at which the product is actually reached to the customer. So it could reach within 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. So that transportation time anyways is the cash conversion cycle. So we really do not have surety as to when the payment will come. What happens in this situation is it is very important for us to prepare cash flows and predict on daily basis or probably 2-day basis how much cash we are going to receive from the debtors and how much cash we have to actually pay to our suppliers, right? So even for a single day, if there is a shortfall, there is a possibility that a check might get dishonored, which again will have its own repercussions. So in order to manage the situation well, we do almost daily or a 2-day forecasting. My team, I mean, one of the person is dedicatedly working on cash flows, considering the factors which might, increase the realization or decrease the realization. There are fixed expenses which needs to be incurred. For example, the rent has to be, paid on time. The electricity bill has to be paid on time. The EMIs have to be paid on time. So if I'm not able to, predict the cash flows, I have to arrange cash for that interim period. So it becomes very important that we prepare cash flows. It really helps to mitigate the risk of cash shortfall in the system, and it allows us to breathe properly without obstruction. So this is what cash flow forecasting means, and it's, as I said, one of the most important building block for any organizations when it comes to working capital optimization. So the liquidity management, while companies can actually maximize its returns on positive cash position. So this will either allow the organization to earn more interest, as I said earlier, or profits on securities for a reasonable time. Say if you have a positive cash position, you can always invest in securities and earn interest on that, or probably you can create an FD with the banks and on interest on FDs for a short term. Or if there is a shortfall, you have to arrange for the cash. So this is the liquidity management. Or at the end, what happens is either they will earn interest by investing in FDs, or they'll be able to save the interest cost because their working capital will not be utilized for that matter. So it's very important to do liquidity management. I think companies should work on reviewing their investment and financing strategies during these times, and allow the treasury departments to act on wisely in order to have maximum benefits for it. So can we move on to the next slide, Prashant? Yeah, thank you. So this is what we discussed. So until now, we discussed the concept of working capital, the components of working capital, the cash conversion cycle, and the levers which are important in order to optimize the working capital. Now, because that's why I wanted to make you guys go through the concept of working capital, now we will be able to understand how we can actually, manage the working capital during these times, and what impact does each component, have on the of the COVID-19 on the working capital. So this is what the slide says. So if you look at it one by one, you have various components that we just discussed of the working capital. So what is the impact of the pandemic on, on the working capital? Let's look at it one by one. Creditors. If I talk of creditors, say because of the lockdown situation, business coming to standstill, all the payments, which are due to be made to suppliers will be delayed in this, except in case of essential items like FMCG or a food product company where the business is working as, normal. Apart from that, I think all the businesses came to standstill, so the payments which were, which were to be made to the suppliers actually got delayed, and this increased the daily payment outstanding for the organization, so and will ultimately increase their current liabilities in business. Hence, the current ratio of the organization actually gets worsened, because as I said, each component will have an impact of the COVID-19. Now, because the payments will be delayed, so we will have more and more creditors in our books. So when we finalize the books, it will have more liabilities, which ultimately will ruin my current ratio of the organization. Lead time for the raw material will get increased. First, due to lockdown, as factories will not be operating with 100% capacities, and now secondly, because of the supply chain disruptions that have happened. I think now still the transportation has started, but during the lockdown, the factories which were still working, they actually faced a lot of supply chain disruption. In fact, for now also, supply chain disruptions organizations can feel. Not, I mean, the logistics partners are not operating the way they used to operate pre-COVID. So the time of the raw material also get increased in this situation. Sudden lockdown and business operating, operations coming on halt, it has actually caused additional liability, as some of the stock would still be lying in transit, and extra charges would have to be paid for the warehouse cost and and the stock maintenance. So this is mainly the creditor side, the impact. If I talk of the debtors impact, I think there will be delay in realization of receivables, as I said, from the customers. I mean, I can tell you our realizations have come to standstill. I have a huge receivable aging in my books, and I'm not in a position to ask from my debtors. Though I mean, I'll say that I'm in a position to ask, but they always have a shoulder of COVID-19, and they say that until the situation comes down, we can't give you release the money. So that's the situation is. So the realization in receivables have been delayed. Ultimately, the entire value chain has been impacted because of this pandemic, and it has a cascade impact in the downstream value chain. So if I talk in our case, the retail is not happening because the malls and the stores are not working. People like you and me are not buying the products. Ultimately, the brands are not able to realize the value of their stock, which is why they are not able to pay our receivables on time. As a result, we are not paying it to our suppliers. So this is the entire value chain has impacted because of this. Extra expense burden for the stock in transit, as I said, will have to be borne in this case as well. So again, a little bit of extra liability. Increased receivables aging, this will put more pressure, and will create a shortfall positions in the business operating cycle, as I said, because it's ultimately blocking the working capital. This will put more stress on cash conversion cycle, because the cash conversion cycle period will get enhanced, and loan repayments and interest payment defaults will come in, which will ultimately worsen the company's credibility when it comes to lending. So all these issues will come in. If I talk of inventory per se, I think increased stock levels at factories will not only increase the warehouse and maintenance cost, but will also increase the finance cost of working capital, as huge amount of working capital is blocked in the form of work in progress and finished goods. In fact, in the form of raw material as well. So if I talk of our own organization, there's a huge stock of raw material lying in our stock, but we can't do, because ultimately that stock was meant to be produced and to be sold to the buyers, but ultimately the buyers have cancelled the orders and the stock is still lying with us. So it is in the form of raw material. The cash and the working capital is blocked, and we really can't do anything. In cases like products where the shelf life is less, there will be huge inventory losses, as companies will have to write off their stock value in books if the stock is not put into use as intended, within a reasonable time. Companies may have to, sell products at discounted rates or at cost in order to recover up the basic cost in cases where the product shelf life is less, etc. So organizations will have to,
Sir, I think you have muted yourself. We are not able to listen. Hello.
Vandeep, you are not audible.
Hello.
hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right now.
Hello,
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Prashant, is my voice audible?
Yes, sir. It is audible now.
Hello. Is my voice audible, Prashant? Can we start?
Yeah, it's audible, sir.
Yes, sir. We can start.
Okay. I think, sorry, there was some network disruption happened. So apologies for that. Okay, so let's continue. So I was telling you about the other cash expenses, the impact that there will be increased tax liabilities in terms of interest cost. Companies will not be in a position to pay regular taxes, etc., as per normal deadline. So ultimately, the COVID-19 has, as I said, it's not a normal kind of a recession. It's a different recession in itself, because the nature is different, and I think even if the companies which were not in recession, they'll probably take the shoulder of COVID-19 and will put everything on it and say that this is because we could not do well or whatever. So times have changed, and this is something which is very new for the entire world and economy, and everyone is struggling to cope up with it. So now, how do companies respond, in these tough situations? I think if any department in the organization who is feeling the most heat, I would say at this time, is the treasury department. I think any CFO will be working day and night, put all his or her effort in evaluating measures in order to, mitigate the financial risk. So this is how it is. We can move to the next slide, Prashant. Yeah, thank you. So now I think all the organizations, as we all discussed, the possible impact of COVID-19 on the working capital and cash management. So organizations will have to ask questions to themselves. The management will have to ask more and more questions within themselves as to how to manage the situation. And in order to manage this situation, they'll have to ask questions on various parameters. So just to give you examples, they'll probably have to ask how reliable is our cash flow forecasting, I told you about the forecasting importance. What role does it play when it comes to cash flow management, when it comes to working capital management? So will we be able to collect our receivables on time? I think organizations will have to look at, you know, those buyers where they know that they will be able to, you know, take money from them. So it's very important to regularly, you know, look at the aging. Then they'll have to ask whether they are adjusting inventories order based on reliable leading indicators, you know, because if they know that supplier is not going to, you know, pay on time, or the supplier is not going to be paid on time, he may not be able to provide you the inventory during these times. So you may have to find out ways to kind of pay that particular supplier. Companies will have to assess whether, you know, they have some assets which they need to sell. So companies, because before, you know, pre-COVID, the situation was never, I mean, companies were going into recession, companies were not able to generate demand, but nobody had predicted, you know, the way COVID has responded for all of us in the you know, in the entire ecosystem. So companies may have assets which they still, you know, do not need those assets. They can find out ways to sell the assets. Companies may have to look for any broken processes. I think it is the time when a lot of companies may have to introspect within themselves and see whether, you know, are there any processes which are broken? Can they work on, you know, re-engineering the processes in order to save their cost? The cost, can they cut out the fat within the organization and see, you know, how can they actually, you know, build the value chain within the organizations in order to have a, you know, a process which will help the organizations to, you know, do better in terms of saving the cost and, you know, making the processes more efficient and effective. What is the financial condition of the key suppliers? As I said, you may have some suppliers whose raw material is purely dependent on the existing business that you're currently running in the crisis. For example, if we are dealing in, you know, preparing the PP kits for now, it is important that our key suppliers who are providing us the raw material for that, I may have to pay them on time. I may not pay to my regular business suppliers, the apparel suppliers, but I may have to pay suppliers who are providing me raw materials for the, you know, preparing the COVID-19 essential items. Similarly, even if there's a common supplier which provided me, you know, raw material for my earlier business, the apparel business, as well as the new business, I still have to, you know, I may have to pay him in order to have good relations. So I have to assess financial condition of our suppliers also, because their condition is ultimately going to, you know, have an impact on my financials in a way. So it's important we ask these questions. Will we have access to our lines of credit? Can we approach bank and ask for additional, you know, funding, or can we look for various other parameters in order to have, you know, funding during these times so that we are able to survive this tough phase? How much money do we need exactly, and for how long? So this is actually nothing but you're preparing cash flow, and you'll get to know how much money is required on daily basis in order to meet your expenses. So you can actually, you know, work out the cash flows and look at your weekly, monthly and quarterly requirements of cash, and for how long you will be needing money. And it's important, you know, to for survival, to reserve as much cash as possible in these times. So these are the questions that organizations may have to ask themselves. Can we source more effectively in order to reduce cost? Yes, this is one of the questions where you should definitely focus more on, because when everything goes well, you know, and everything is in the normal course, generally company focus is not on, you know, looking at the factors such as you know, sourcing the right vendor, or probably looking for substitution of vendors, because they're happy with what is getting, you know, from what they're getting and what price they are getting, what quality they're getting. But if it is very important, you know, to, in order to reduce the cost, you may look for vendors which can provide you the same level of raw material with the same quality at a cheaper price. The only thing is you will have to shift your focus and ask your procurement team to look at, you know, various procurement strategies. They may have to make new procurement strategy in order to, you know, procure the right material at a low cost. So these are the questions which companies have to ask. Any major customers experiencing financial issues, say if one of your buyers is actually going in for a insolvency or liquidation, you may have to kind of act and, you know, be a part of, you know, you have to proactive enough in order to see that you are able to recover money from them. So these are the questions which becomes very important for you to ask all the organizations. It's very imperative that organizations ask these questions more frequently in order to assess the actual cash position and take preventive measures to mitigate and minimize the risk that has caused due to this pandemic. Moving on, Prashant, we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so how do organizations respond to this immediate challenge? How do organizations work towards adopting ways so that they're able to manage their working capital? So well, first is building a structure and framework for agile forecasting. I think we discussed in the previous slides how important cash flow forecasting is at this time and how it helps in better predicting the cash position. As I said, it is one of the toughest job, as the person has to coordinate with almost all the departments for insights, facts, and to be able to predict the most accurate cash scenario. It becomes extremely important, that exercise is done collaboratively with involving all the stakeholders, and makes it cross-functional. It helps to kind of build different scenarios for expected crisis tenure across business units and departments, and then companies will be in a better position to manage the cash flow position. Second is you make everyone a CFO of the organization. You give the designation and say you all are CFOs. So it becomes extremely important that everyone in the organization think like the CFO. And why I'm telling you this is, I'll tell you. Generally, what is seen is, I'm talking specifically of business operation and the supply chain managers. They generally spend their time thinking more about operations, and they do not pay much attention, to finance and treasury issues. More often than not, what we have seen is their focus is more on inventory levels and other, business parameters, which are driven mainly by business and customer service requirements, and they have least focus on the financial aspects and constraints. So it's important that everyone should think like a finance professional and should be able to try and have that cross functional relationship in order to make the situation better. So what if the situation is reversed? What if the working capital was company's primary constraint on inventory, and then supply chain managers or the business operation managers are given the challenge of making it work for the organization? So it become very important to make everyone think like in one direction, as I said, and this will ultimately help the engine to smoothly pull the train during these tough times. So it's important. Moving on, companies have to focus on cash and cash conversion cycle. We discussed the importance of cash conversion cycle. Most of the time, management focus is always, on growing the top line, focusing on the CAGR growth, how much EBITDA they are making. So, of course, it has to be the focus, but most of the time, the focus is always on this, and routine back office activities such as paying bills on time, turning receivables into cash, following up for overdue payments, managing inventory levels, etc. They are often taken for granted. Companies should shift their focus from P&L items to the balance sheet items. So when I say P&L items, I mean they should shift their focus from growing top line and bottom line towards balance sheet items, that is maintaining their assets and current liabilities. So you would see most of the supply chain managers, they're working mainly on inventories, when focusing on components of working capital, as we discussed. In order to minimize the working capital requirement during these times, it's very important to apply a coordinated approach between finance as well as the other departments, to address these issues. Moving on, so companies may have to revisit their variable costs. I think this is one of the common factors to be looked at. I mean, we have seen a lot of companies taking measures to cut recurring expenses during these times. Many companies have done layoffs, as I said. They've shut down their non-working stores. They have cost cutting is kind of a traditional way of managing the crisis in most of the cases, and it works. Focusing on reducing the variable cost, it's often a very a quicker way to immediately reduce the cash outflows than focusing on the fixed cost. But of course there are typical variable cost reduction levers, such as you're imposing travel bans, you're imposing bans on non-essential meeting restrictions, you're putting most policies where companies, you're encouraged to work from home to reduce the admin cost. You're imposing hiring, freezes in the organization, placing restrictions on discretionary spend like entertainment, training, etc., so on and so forth. So these kind of measures have to be looked at by all the organizations. In manufacturing entities where labor is, a significant cost line of a business, I think avenues such as reducing contract labor, then, working only with the permanent labor, and then doing redistribution of work to permanent workforce, etc. I think these are the ways to, preserve cash during these times. Moving on. Can we move on to the next slide, Prashant? Okay, thank you. Focusing on inventory management, I think due to lockdown and shortage of raw material and components and parts, I think companies are at a risk of supply chain disruptions. Companies may have to, work on modifying the safety stock levels due to demand and supply chain volatility issues, which ultimately has the effect of, increasing the overall inventory levels. So from a cash flow perspective, I think at the same time, companies may be considering, actions probably to reduce their finished good inventories and making sure that, especially the perishable products can be sold as soon as possible. They may be able to, they will be looking at policies where they can, make sure that they have reduced inventories at their premises, because, where the waste, where a waste is an important consideration, because ultimately if the products are perishable, they will not have, shelf life more, and if ultimately it'll end in, writing of the inventory if the product is not out of the factory. In case of a normal supply of raw material, measures such as just-in-time policy, lead time reduction, etc. I think these are the measures which ultimately help to reduce the cash conversion cycle. So company may have to focus on these policies. Companies will have to tie up with their suppliers. They probably have to pay extra, or in advance to suppliers, so that they ensure that the inventory, is on time, because they're trying to say, if the company is applying just-in-time policy, so they will want to make sure that before the production starts, they ensure that 2 days or 3 days before the production, they have inventory in time, because they're following just-in-time policy in order to have, a lower inventory holding period. So they may have to pay advance to suppliers in order to secure their inventories on time. So these are such kind of measures which company may have to focus on. Then managing and expediting receivables, and extending payables wherever possible. So working out receivables aging on daily basis, because it's important that you kind of look at buyers who can, you can pay you. So for MSME companies, generally, it's a norm that MSME company should be paid within 45 days. So you can always, use that leverage and ask your buyers to pay you on time, so that your cash flow is maintained. Finance function should always follow, and more rigorously on outstanding payments. The business owners or the people who are the front ender for customers, they should follow with them in order to realize the payments on time, and if possible request for early payments from customers if the customer is really cash rich and in a good position. Make sure you're doing timely and accurate invoicing in these times, because if there is errors in your billing process, it can again lead to costly delays in receiving payment. So make sure you have all the process in place, there is no lag in the processes. At the same time, seeking extension for payment terms from suppliers wherever possible is a good option in order to manage cash position. As I said, it's important to manage the balance, but in these times, you can always ask for suppliers to give some extended terms if possible, so that you have a better position in cash. Of course, do not, as I said, do not unilaterally decide to delay payments and force extension on suppliers, as this will ultimately damage your relationships with them. You have to try and work out an agreement, where both you and your supplier can live together and beat the crisis. Then considering the alternative supply chain financing options, in order to generate faster cash flow from your receivables, you may consider factoring your receivables as one of the options, although it is relatively expensive at this time, but it might help the companies to make a better cash, create a better cash position in books. There are various NBFCs and private sector banks which are offering challenge financing to their customers. Then apart from this, companies can also consider options, with their customers for early payment of dues by providing upfront cash discounts. So a lot of companies, work in this mode. I'll give you our example. So I'm not talking of the COVID situation, but in general source also. So one of our customer is Reliance Retail. So and we manufacture garments for one of their brands. So the normal payment terms with them is generally 90 days from the date of goods that reach to them. But they have a policy wherein if we need payment or their supplier needs payment before the payment terms, it can be discounted at a rate of 3% per month. And so when I say 3% per month, it means 36% annual, right? It's an expensive arrangement, I know, but sometimes we have to accept, these discounts when we really want to make sure that we have a positive cash position. So we have done this also. It's nothing, but it comes with cost. That's it. So companies can work, towards looking at these options in order to have a better cash position. Lastly, it's very important that companies think beyond four walls. So as I said, I mean, you have to think for the entire value chain. One has to focus, on the entire ecosystem. Companies just can't think of their own position in isolation. I think in order to maximize the working capital, companies needs to think about the entire ecosystem and supply chain. By delaying payments to their suppliers, they're just shifting the burden, to the other value chain, to the partner of the other value chain. It's important to, carefully consider the upstream and downstream impact of the actions that companies are taking. If companies are able to realize the receivables, I think they should be able to pass down the relief to their suppliers down the value chain as well, in order to ease the pressure throughout in the ecosystem. In extreme cases, if you may want to help your suppliers, for example, if there's a critical supplier at risk, companies may want to help him outright with immediate payments, as I said, in order to protect their own supply chain, and keep their goods and services flowing. So it's important that we think not only in isolation, but think beyond four walls and look at the upstream and downstream processes as well in the ecosystem we are in. I think this is it from the working capital perspective. Just one more slide in the end. Prashant, can we move on to the next slide? So this is it from the impact and what are the measures that can be taken, while managing the working capital. I thought it will be good to, kind of put one slide where we can always also show some of the measures which are taken by the government in order to, help the companies, so measures such as, measures by the banks. Government has provided close to 50,000 crore amount of equity infusion especially for MSMEs, through funds of funds scheme, where government will invest in MSMEs as shareholders. So this is again a part of the mega package that was just announced by the FM 4 days back. Repo rate has been reduced by 75 basis points, which is a big move. Liquidity coverage ratio for all the financial institutions has been reduced to 80% from 100%. So this will ultimately help the financial institutions, to and NBFCs to be able to borrow, from banks with a reduced liquidity coverage ratio. PSUs are providing additional working capital at lower rates to companies to ensure high, enough liquidity in the system. I mean, in this case, for example, we have taken additional 10% working capital funding, at the rate of 7.5%. So it's a very good rate, which probably you will not get in the normal course of business. In fact, I'll tell you, institutions like SIDB, they're providing short-term COVID-19 crisis loans, at the rate of 5%. And trust me, guys, I mean, I have never seen in my entire career a rate of 5%. Generally you hear these rates outside India. In India, you will never see companies, are being provided with funding at the rate of 5%. And we have taken one loan from SIDB during this time. So these are the measures which government are taking. MSME companies, they are being provided with additional emergency borrowing options for COVID-19 crisis. And this is collateral free, where you don't have to provide any security. And it's part of the mega package, as I said, announced by our Honorable Prime Minister. The amount that will be provided in this scheme will be approximately 3 lakh crores. There are other assistance, which has been given by the government. So government has actually stopped the clock for all of you guys, if you have education loan going on, or there's a car loan going on, any other loan, I think government has provided a 3 months moratorium period where you do not have to pay your EMIs. I think this period may get extended by another 3 months, but you will have the interest component which will be there. But at least this thing is, if you have a tenure of say 60 months, so ultimately your now loan period will become 63 months. So they have actually given extension for 3 months, and I think you should be able to, you should take this as one of the measures, because this is very good. In case where your bank has deducted EMIs because of the automatic deduction, I think you can always go back to your bank and they will credit the amount in your account. Government has suspended interest payment on working capital and credit card period payments for 3 months. So this is again something which has provided huge relief to a lot of personal individuals as well as companies, and this will not have an impact on the CIBIL scores of the individuals. Government have given extensions for filing GST returns, income tax returns, a lot of other statutory returns. So, and they've given flexibility of payments, statutory payments as well. There was one announcement which was made, I think, 2 weeks back, or probably a week back, where they said that they'll be processing immediate income tax refunds for people whose refund amount is less than or equal to 5 lakhs. So, and this has happened because trust me, guys, my personal refund has also come back. So this was pending from last 8 months, but I have immediately got the refund because of this thing. So government is actually helping individuals to cope up with this situation. I think government is paying the entire provident fund contribution for employees with the wages less than 15K, where the companies workers are less than or equal to 100. And in the last mega package that was announced by FM in the last 3-4 days back, I think MSME definition has also changed from an investment perspective to a combination of turnover and investment. So more and more companies can come under the purview of MSMEs, which is small and medium enterprise, and then they can benefit from this mega package. So I think these are some of the measures which government has taken in order to help the situation, and allows a lot of companies to see how we can actually look at this pandemic. And as I said in my initial discussion, my initial slides, I think companies will probably have to, in fact, not only companies, I think we as individuals will also have to kind of take it as a new normal and find out ways to live with it. The only thing is, probably we'll have to change our behaviors in terms of maintaining social distancing measures. We'll have to wear masks all the time. We have to make sure that we are not hampering anybody's health by not behaving properly. I think we'll have to adopt more etiquettes when it comes to maintaining hygiene, and especially we'll have to take care of the elderly people, especially with the people who have less immunity. So I think these are new ways of working we'll have to adopt, and we have to consider it as a new normal. I think this is it, guys, from my side. I hope I have not bored you much, because it was a long presentation, but I think we have finished within the time that was given to me. So over to you, Prashant. Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So, sir, we have certain doubts from the attendees. So, Gautam has asked a question that, do government suppliers typically purchase trade credit insurance to protect receivable realization in case of customer default on payment?
Sorry, come again, please.
Do government suppliers typically purchase trade credit insurance to protect receivable realization in the case of customer default on payment?
Okay. See, generally, like us, we do not do it because generally it is not available as such. But there are big companies like Shahi Exports or Orient Craft, because they have heavily invested in export buyers. So in that case, they do it. But domestic business, it does not happen much, to be very frank. If the default is there, you have no option but to ask your buyers to pay the payment on time. This is what you can do.
Okay, so second, Himanshu Niyal, he has asked that why are LCs, letter of credits, less popular for domestic transactions, while almost all export transactions, especially MSMEs, happen through LCs?
Okay. Hi, Himanshu. See, I'll tell you what. Generally, LCs work in the case of exports. That's true, because LCs, from an export perspective, it actually acts as a safeguard, in terms of the money that the vendor will get. So in domestic, it's not that it's not popular, but I'll tell you, I'll give you a typical example. So brands like fashion retail or this future retail or Reliance, who are, you know, just brands like Big Bazaar. Big Bazaar Fashions, they're working, they have huge quantities. Reliance Trends, they have huge quantities, you know, to be ordered from various garment manufacturing companies. And companies like Orient Craft, Shahi Exports, you know, what they do is they dedicatedly, you know, provide capacity to these one buyers, and the quantity is so huge, I can't tell you. I mean, so the monthly quantity that they are supplying to Reliance is say 1 lakh or 2 lakh pieces of garments per month, just for the one brand. And so in these cases, even in domestic business, Reliance and brands like Future Retail, which is the Big Bazaar business, they provide LCs to garment manufacturers. So in domestic also, LCs are being provided. So I know Future Retail provided the Future Retail, the Big Bazaar business, they provide LCs to Orient Craft, which is one of the factories in which are supplying garments to Big Bazaar, Reliance Trend, and then Future, and then all these big players who play in quantities, they provide LCs to the manufacturers, because if manufacturers don't get the security of payments, they really can't put in there, you know, so much of money, because if the payment is, you know, not on time, the whole investment goes, you know, and providing 1 lakh, 2 lakh pieces at a 90-day payment term is really a risk. You know, it's a risk. Actually, the business can go bankrupt. So in domestic cases also, LCs are not that, you know, they're not popular, but they're only popular where the business size is huge.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Ruksar had a question that how one can undertake cash flow forecasting for the startups, given that there are no direct competition in the same field.
Okay. So for startups, you know, I think it's a different concept and different ecosystem altogether. In fact, when I was in IIM Shillong, we had a session on startups only. So there was a session which was there, and we discussed very, you know, good points on startups. So as I said, for a cash flow forecasting perspective, I think first of all, it's very important that you bring on board somebody who has financial knowledge, because generally what we have seen in startups now, that entrepreneurs and founders who are not very, you know, who think that they know a little bit of finance, they don't give priority to finance department person, don't think of initially engaging somebody with a finance background in the startup companies. I think it's very important to engage from very start. You know, when you're starting your operations, especially in startup mode, you have to find out a break-even point. You have to find out whether your revenue model will be recurring, whether you will have all the statutory dues to be paid on time, and preparing cash flows, because as I said, cash is a big elephant in the room we can't ignore. So from a startup perspective, I think in order to reduce the cost, you have to prepare cash flows from very starting. For example, if you are into technology, so you have to make sure what is the burn rate that is currently going on. You have to predict the burn rate, and you have to see how much new employees you will onboard, especially in startup. What will be the recurring cost, monthly cost for, you know, providing salaries to the new workers or the new employees that you'll onboard in next 5 months, 6 months down the line. What will be the revenue, because you may earn revenue, but whether the revenue will be ultimately converted into receivables and then cash is also important thing. So you have to kind of predict that the revenue that you're making in startups, whether you will be able to convert that into cash on time or not, is important. So from a startup perspective, it is very important, whatever cost, even a single penny that you are investing in. For example, applying for patent, and you know that you are developing an application which will probably be, you know, finalized in next 2 months time. So you may have to consider it that after 2 months, once your application is up and running, you may have to go for a patent for that application. So that patent cost has to be predicted. So all these measures, I think you have to first jot down the points as to what are the costs that you are going to incur in the near future, what are the relevant costs which are ultimately important, and what are the costs which can be, you know, ignored for a certain time, and then based on that you have to create cash flows based on various scenarios. I hope that answers.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We have 3 more questions. This is from Karthik. He has asked that how hard will it hit the export industries, as everybody is looking for their own domestic industries, Indian Prime Minister to ask the promotion of domestic products. Tranche of government is providing working capital for short term and medium term to run business. So, what do you think that how the export industry would be affected with these policies of countries?
I think if you look at the intention of the government and the message that is ranging across the globe is people are looking at, or the companies are looking at India as one of the next manufacturing options apart from China. As per my analysis and as per the reports that I have been reading from last 1-2 weeks, I think even if a 4 or 5% of manufacturing shifts from China to India, it will be a huge booster for India. Trust me, guys. It will be a huge booster because it will create immense opportunities for people in India. It will create huge job employment opportunities, and it will boost the MSMEs. So if you look at it currently, MSMEs are contributing almost 30% to the country's GDP. The aim of the government has been from last 2 years, and Mr. Nitin Gadkari, who is the MSME minister, has always said that he wants the MSME share in India's GDP to be 50% by 2023 or 2024. I think this is not very far. The only thing is, in order to bring manufacturing in India, it is very important that policy should be put in place by the government, single window process systems, and making sure that the person or the business owner who is trying to do business, it is easy for them. Now, coming to the export point, I think what they said is we have to stop importing from China. So when we say stop importing from China or any other country, that means we have to create the same capability within India. So once we have that manufacturing capability within India, we'll of course start creating products and will reduce our dependency of imports, from other countries. What will happen is, of course, when we'll start having more, Swadeshi things in India, we'll start producing a lot of goods which we generally import from outside, raw material for pharma or auto components, as I said, consumer durable, all these products. If we start producing in India, of course, first we will make sure that the demand for these products is met in India, but at the same time, government will never stop exports, because export is something from where a country will get flourished. So I think there has been a difference in understanding. Exports will never be stopped by government. The only thing is, currently the situation is that, for example, the masks are currently going on, PPE kits are being prepared. I think if you look at it, I think the country economy is currently going on PP kits. Even I was speaking to some other person yesterday also. So I said even the cobbler and a panwala is trying to sell a PP kit, and in the current scenario, right? The situation is that everyone is working towards essential items of COVID-19. They are preparing, either they are manufacturing masks or either they are trading masks. N95 is being rotated and being sold on WhatsApp like anything. So everyone is working. Now, what has happened is government has made sure that these products are not to be exported to other countries because there is a shortfall in India for these products. And once we predict, because we are also into this business, we assess that probably in times to come. In fact, I was reading a article today in Times of India. It says that there is a requirement of close to 2 crore PPE kits by June in India, and by June they should be able to cover up, considering the daily capacity PP kits India is producing with almost close to 400 vendors. So after June, the export ban will be lifted. And I think later on also, it's important that we create capabilities of manufacturing in India and we stop importing products from outside countries. And at the same time, we export those products to other countries. Then only our economy and the GDP will grow. And the 5 trillion GDP, dream can only be come true by that only. I hope that answers.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And Akshay has asked that how do you think the lockdown would affect the rural borrowings given the measure announced by government?
It's a very relevant question. I think everyone thinks about it, because the only thing is, the most impacted, if any sect that has been most impacted is the rural India. So government is making sure that all these all the measures that have been taken by the government, whether it is providing rations to rural people or the families under various schemes of Pradhan Mantri Yojana and Manrega Yojana, all these have to be ultimately reached out to the rural people. I think in given India's vast population, I think for us it seems like a challenge how the workers will get affected, how the farmers will get benefited from this. But I think they haven't. Yesterday I was listening to the news where Smriti Imrani, the Minister of Textiles, was saying that they have tried and reached out to close to 80 crore people by providing these rations, and government is ensuring that within the coming month they'll be providing 2 months of ration to all these people in the rural India, and a lot of loans will be provided to farmers. So I think that there is a proper process as to how these things will be reached out to various people intended for use, and India has a policy, and with this government I think they will be able to kind of get benefited from it.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Devanshu has asked that what is your opinion about TREDS? It is a platform of
Yeah.
trade receivables financing. So, what is
Okay,
your
so
opinion about TREDS and how effective do you think it would be with respect to facilitating the trade receivable financing in case of Amazon?
okay, so Trades is an platform specially designed for MSMEs, and it is a platform which was created in partnership with SIDBI, if I'm not wrong. Yes, and I think it has been effective up to a certain extent. But I'll tell you a very practical aspect to it. I mean, though there are certain things, I'll tell you. We are we are also partners with we are member of CII, which is Confederation of Indian Industry, and within the Uttarakhand state I'm the member of the economic and taxation policy review, where we keep on telling what all things we expect from government and they draft policy. So what is the basic thing that has come out is, generally if you look at MSMEs, because the trade system is only for MSMEs mainly, where they have said that MSMEs are they are they have to receive the payments within 45 days, and if they don't, then ultimately the buyer will be penalized. What has happened? Either we ask the customers to pay us on time, otherwise there will be a legalized action, or we go on Trades and try to factorize our bills. Now what has happened, this has a negative impact as well. The customers who are working with us say, if you are MSMEs and we have to pay you on 45 days, will not work with you, will work with somebody who is not an MSME. So ultimately is impacting MSME business also at the same time. So this is what a feedback that has come from a lot of companies, and we also as an MSME can't really put the dagger on customers face and say, give me the money, otherwise I'll complaint on MSME portal. So this is how it is. And on Trade specifically, what has happened is, Trade is designed in a way that it should help MSMEs, but not all MSMEs are able to take benefit of it, because when you go and try to sell your bill so that some bank can actually take it and fund you, first the buyer has to accept that your bill will be your bill will ultimately be financed. And sometimes some banks have list of panel customers on it. For example, I go and want to go to Trades and want to kind of take money by doing channels financing for a bill from Mohan Clothing, which is Blackberries. But those banks which are listed on Trades, they don't have Blackberries on their panel, so ultimately they will not accept. Or the other way around is, if I go and say I want to get my bill financed from ICICI, but Blackberry says no, we won't accept. So there are loopholes in the process. Some companies are getting benefited, some are not. I think we have always raised a request to CII. We have been we are keeping on saying that we need to again review this policy as to see how we can actually put Trades system as one of the most key measures for MSMEs to realize money on time. So some companies are utilizing it, some are still not going on.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. We are tight on time, so we will take one more question. This is from Pratik. He has
Okay.
asked that what could be the impact of COVID-19 on the bond and commercial paper market?
I think for bond and commercial paper, see, I may not be the correct person to exactly give you the details of it because I'm not very much aware of how things work. But all I know is there was a package that was announced yesterday or day before by our honorable finance minister for mutual funds as well. And a lot of these mutual funds, they actually raise money. All these NBFCs, they raise money through commercial bonds and future paper. I think companies, NBFCs, as I said, liquidity ratio has been reduced for NBFC. A lot of these companies have been given support from the government with respect to their collateral and bank guarantee credit. So I think mutual funds, commercial papers, and bonds will really, I mean, it will not be a task for mutual funds and NBFCs to raise these papers in order to fund. So I think government giving a lot of taking a lot of measures to ensure that all these parameters within the financial system should work within in the next 2 years time in order to upkeep the economy. So I think that with the factors that have recently announced, the parameters and the measures which were recently announced by FM day before yesterday on mutual funds, I think it should help commercial bond papers and the bonds companies as well.
Thank you, sir. As the last remark, I want to ask that as due to COVID-19, unemployment is at high and it is likely that job market would be tight in future. So what skills do you recommend that a student should work upon in order to thrive this supplement?
Okay. I think you all would be graduated soon, and I wish and pray and wish you all luck that you guys, get placed in good companies and do well in your careers. Nevertheless, I think COVID-19 has, if you look at it, from a different perspective, it has given us all an opportunity to rework towards our skills. So there are a lot of courses which are available on internet, like if courses on digital technology. So I think the digital transformation, artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, I think these are the new technologies which are going to take over everything with industry 4.0, which is so in now for the next decade, which will be implemented throughout. And all these consulting companies are talking of industry 4.0, which is nothing but how you can apply AI, how you can implement robotics, automation, machine learning. So I think there are a lot of courses which you all should try and focus on. There are paid courses for that. There are a lot of consulting companies like BCG, McKinsey, KPMG has a learning academy, Deloitte has a learning academy. These companies are providing these short-term certification courses. You should definitely try and look for that. In the field of data analytics, I think you can try and work on getting some knowledge of the tools. For example, there's a tool called Alteryx, which is very good. So it is nothing but an Excel in a way, but it is kind of a front-ending tool for operating Excel in the back end, and it's a very good tool. I've personally worked on it. You can always have a training on Alteryx where you can actually build. It's like you're creating a front. So people who are engineers would be able to understand it. It's nothing but you are creating, front ending the application by putting a lot of formulas on the screen, and in the back end your Excel will be worked out. So it is kind of you're putting a macro. It's a very good tool. You should definitely go for and try and learn something from it. Then there are other tools like a lot of BI tools, business intelligence tools like Tableau. You have Quick View. You have BI Micro Strategy. Then you have Oracle BI. There are a lot of tools which helps you in data analytics and visualization of data. I think having certification of this also adds to it. Apart from this, I think project management certification, which is PMP. Now you guys are doing internships, right? So I'm sure you would be involved in a lot of projects. So if you are in doing internship with say consulting companies, or if you are doing internship with some of the companies where you get involved on a project, you can always use that experience and go for a Lean Six Sigma yellow belt or a green belt certification, where you can always show your project that you're doing on internship as one of the projects which are to be submitted there, and then you can earn a green belt Six Sigma or a yellow belt Six Sigma certification, which really helps. So I think these are some of the courses you should definitely do during this lockdown, which will ultimately add to your skills and definitely give you results once you go and join companies, once you get graduated from the college.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this session.
Yep. I thank you, everyone, Prashant, Kanchan, all the students, all the participants who joined today, and especially the Finance and Economics Club and the placement committee for giving me this opportunity to deliver the lecture to you. I hope I did not bore you guys much, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys should get an extra knowledge as to how companies are managing the working capital. We'll definitely try and see that if given an opportunity, things goes well. I look forward to join you on campus and we do a good live session there as well. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. It was an honor to be here with all of you today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking out time and delivering such an insightful session. We hope that participants have gained a good idea about working capital management and how disruptions are being happening around the COVID-19 and how companies are managing it. If anyone has any doubts, they can take it on the offline mode. They can connect with us on the LinkedIn page, or they can also directly connect with the sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So you can. So I'll share the PDF deck with you, Prashant, and you can share the deck with all the participants. And all the participants,
Yes.
if anyone wants to have any questions or reach out to me, I'll give my email ID to Prashant, and they can anytime reach out to me for any queries.
Thank you, sir. Thank you on the behalf of IIM
Thank you so much.
Visakhapatnam.
Yeah.
We look forward for
Thank
more
you so much.
sessions.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
definitely. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, sir.